Future of conversational design. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be focusing on three big topics. So the first one is going to be how LLMs have changed the game. And it's a big change, as we all know. For example, like no one was talking about chatbots a year ago. Today, everyone's talking about chatbots all the time. Even the word chatbots has changed. For example, like if you've been in the space, you probably have talked to other people and clients that would call it a chat box, as an example, or they would think of chatbots as the bots that are on Twitter that are spamming people, right? So now the idea of what a chatbot is dramatically changing involved. We're also going to be talking about the new tech stack for conversational designers, right? And then lastly, what the future holds for conversational design. Now, how have LLMs, large language models, this is like ChatGPT and Bard, changed the game? So the biggest change is that you could now build a great experience in a very short amount of time. So I could build today a better bot in 3 days, okay, by myself than I could have 2 years ago with a great team and like $1 million worth of budget. And it wouldn't even be close. So just think about that. 3 days alone versus $1 million and a great team, and the solo guy wins. And that's the world that we're in now. So what that means is if you're a company, if you're a large organization, you have a lot of conversational designers, your great designers are 100 times more valuable now. It also maybe means that you don't need that many conversational designers. We'll talk more on that later. So in terms of how we're building things, the things that have changed is that we don't need to build out a flow for every possible intent a user may have. And then it's way easier to build out great products. It happens in terms of days. So now let's look at the stack. And so there's three main parts. And this role has changed from creating flows to being more of a big picture and thinking about how knowledge and information is organized, okay? And how we can communicate knowledge information with users and help them take action, right? And so a part of that is how we talk to the AI, and that's prompt engineering and chaining. The next part is how we're organizing the information so our LLMs can get the right responses back for users, okay? So we'll be talking about knowledge bases, data, and then also bias. And then lastly, we're going to be talking about action and analytics, because we don't want to just answer questions like an FAQ bot. We also want the bot to take action. So for example, maybe the user is interested in one of your products or services. Well, we want the bot to follow up and help them through a sale, or help them with something, right? Or gather their information, or whatever that goal is. You want to help users achieve those goals. And prompt engineering, okay? Right now, there's a lot of hype around prompt engineering. It's important because it basically you have to have a good clarity of thinking, and you have to have a good understanding of the information or the knowledge that you're trying to extract from the bot. And so by being able to craft really good prompts, you can get really good, concise, well-structured, and clear answers from ChatGPT. What that does is that reduces a bias and it reduces bad answers. Okay, so that's why prompt engineering is very important. And as you build out these systems, what you're really doing is you're going to be giving a prompt to the AI system of what to do with this piece of information. So for example, imagine we're building a dream bot, right? You're going to give the AI system the context of how to interpret the information they're getting from the user. The user types in their dream. We send that piece of information to the bot. With this piece of information from the user, also the bot has a prompt. The prompt will be something like, please interpret the user's dream. And now the bot understands what to do. So these are the values of a good prompt. It makes it very clear on what the system needs to do. It also ends up being less biased. It ends up being more relevant and accurate, and just overall better. Okay. Using knowledge bases and data. Now, this is maybe one of my favorite parts. Okay. Okay. So now let's talk about data versus knowledge base, because they're two very different things. Okay. And you're going to be using both. Data is basically the raw facts and information. This is typically stored in a database. It's got a bunch of fields, and it's things that are observable that we put in there. Now, on its own, it's meaningless. And this is where the knowledge base comes. We create meaning around this data information in the knowledge base. We give it a structure, and we organize it in a specific way where it could be understood, and something could be done with the sort of information. And so the important thing here is that a knowledge base is constructed from data. Now, let's talk about bias. Okay, so you could think of bias as A, unavoidable, and B, in some way, it's just a natural part of being alive. On a very, very, you could say it abstract manner, bias is any sort of preference that we have. So, for example, like you might have a bias towards drinking coffee versus drinking tea, right? And so in that example, bias is not a bad thing. It's just a preference that you have. But now, as you apply preferences to other parts of your life, what might end up happening, and what often does happening, is that we often don't see certain types of information very clearly. We start to get fuzzy. Like, for example, if you have a preference for coffee over tea, you're most likely going to have a lot more insight and information about coffee and a lot less information and insight about tea. If someone were to ask you questions about tea, you might not have the right answers. Also, in situations where there's an overlap between coffee and tea, if someone asks you a question, you might automatically assume that the question is about coffee. So in this way, we're building these prejudices where we prefer one thing over another, where we have an inclination. And what that does is statistically introduces bias, and it distorts what we're measuring, what we're analyzing, and it sets us off track towards what the real meaning of things is, or what our real goal is. Now, is this at all avoidable? Well, let's talk about it. Now, this is how bias works, and this is where it starts. And it starts basically in this very moment, right? Because one of the biases we tend to have, and we assume that this is true, is that we come into a situation or an environment, and that we see things for what they are, that the facts equally present themselves to everybody, and that we understand, and then we act based on those facts. Okay, this sort of view is very, very very, very incorrect. Okay. What really happens is that when we come into an environment, we're automatically putting our attention on the things that we value. Okay. So we're constantly focusing our attention, and we're doing this automatically. This happens a priori. And by focusing our attention on something specific, we're excluding everything else. So, for example, right now, you're probably looking at me. You're listening to my voice, seeing my face. And as a result, you might not notice if there's like a fly buzzing around you, right? And so all of a sudden, what we've done is we have a bias through our attention towards very specific information that we think is valuable to us. Then comes the second part of bias is perspective, right? Like, you're seeing me right now, and you're only seeing me from one perspective, only from one point of view. And that's also going to give you biased information. So the information you're having about any sort of object or thing is always going to be limited. It's always going to come from a point of view. And that could skew how we make meaning of things, which is the next thing, is that we don't just like look at information or look at pure data. What we do, we automatically start creating meaning from it. And we do that through storytelling, when we tell ourselves what happened or what's happening or what it means. And that's how we remember things too. We remember things through meaning. And so what ends up happening is when you're creating a knowledge base, you're going through these three things. You're first of all deciding on where to put your attention. Okay, you're also deciding. You're also looking at it from a specific perspective, and then you're also creating meaning around all of this. Doug, let's take you off video. Okay, so in this way, it's good to be aware of this process in your own life personally, also in how teams do it, and how this leads to bias. So let's go over. This is I think it's 186 biases. It kind of goes over this in a chart. And here we get to see what the type of biases that we kind of end up having over and over again. Some of them are around meaning. Some of them it's too much information. Some of them is what should be remembered. The other parts is like needing to act fast. And so this is kind of something that happens inevitably. Now, here's some example. And the thing is that since it happens both inevitably and subconsciously, sometimes it can be really hard to catch. And since part of bias is our own preferences, like, for example, you might have a preference for coffee, okay? It becomes very hard to catch some of the ways where that could skew things. Now, here are a couple of examples. A man orders chips and gets fries, right? This would be an example of a language or a dialect bias, right? In Britain, chips are fries, and so the bot in this case assumes a British interpretation. Training bot on only good conversation. So this is a common mistake people make because they think, well, I want to train the bot, I want to give it good information, I want to give it good conversation, I want to give it good examples. Now, all the model knows is what's good. It doesn't know what's bad, okay? And it's a well-intentioned, but it leads to really big bias. So later on, when the bot's trying to answer questions, it won't have any way of understanding that it's not doing a good job. Here's how accurate information, accurate data inside your database could lead to bias. For example, let's say that you have, let's say you're a jobs company and you hire and you help, your bot does hiring and analyzes resumes. You're giving it examples of good resumes. The vast majority of them, let's say, are females, that are great workers that are working as nurses. And so now all of a sudden you have this statistical anomaly where in this one profession in registered nursing, the vast majority is females. Now the bot, the AI, the NLU in the background could connect this thing and they could extrapolate that it means something, okay? And then it could start to inadvertently turn down male resumes as an example. So that's an example of a accurate data leading to a stereotype. This is a stereotype bias. So this is something else that you have to watch out for. These things are kind of subconscious and they're unconscious. Here are some tips on designing good knowledge bases. So, but before we jump in there, do you know the difference between Chat, GPT, and Bard? Does anyone know? Okay, nope, good. All right, let's talk about it. Because this is going to give us a lot of insight. So this is the difference between ChatGPT and Bard. One is generative pre-trained transformer. That's what GPT stands for. And the other one is bidirectional. What this means is that ChatGPT is going from left to right reading and trying to predict the next token. Okay. And since it has so much information within so many different contexts, it's able to do an amazing job at that. But that's all it is. Okay. It's a great talker. And for example, if you give it why did the chicken, it'll try to predict what the next word should be. Okay. It goes from left to right. And that's it. Bard, on the other hand, is bidirectional. It could predict things going left from right and right to left. Okay. It's a great listener, and it tries to use a natural language understanding. It tries to actually comprehend what this is actually about. Now let's look at what that means in real life. Okay, so here is an example. ChatGPT, if you'd say something like, take the letter lollipop and reverse them, this is an example of ChatGPT failing. Because what is it doing? It is trying to predict what the next token should be. So instead of lollipop, it's POPPLOL, right? Because off of its large language model, this comes up more often than the other thing. And so this is an example of a bias, right? This is an example of a bias based on how it's supposed to predict tokens. It's based off of its large language model, right? And so you could see that it kind of really doesn't understand what you're asking. Now, we asked Bard the same thing, and it got, yeah, sure, and it got it right? So now we take this a step further, make it a little bit more complicated for both systems, see if they can do it. The next challenge was for them to write a very short poem that starts and ends with the word chatbot. Again, this is really hard for ChatGPT to do. It failed. It created a great poem, though. It's a great poem. And Bard also failed. And then again, it's hard for it to predict because it doesn't know what it's going to say next. Okay. What this does is it really informs us on how we need to structure data. Okay. It's really important semantically to understand the limitations of what these models can do and can't do. Now you just saw an example of a very simple failure. And you probably hear people asking, oh, we have a couple of questions. Yeah. So So these limitations really paint a picture of what's possible and and how to organize information. So these systems could really understand it really, really well. So now let's talk about that. We're going to be constructing a knowledge base. And what it's going to do is it's going to increase your accuracy, coherence, and relevancy. And it's also going to create a lot more value to users. And when we're thinking about a knowledge base, there's going to be a few major components to it, right? So the first part is going to be how you structure your data in terms of a hierarchy. Okay, and one of the ways to think about it is to think about it from as a mind map. Like, for example, the company organization that you work for is probably solving a problem in one of the main domains in life, right? And so, if you were to create a mind map of all of the knowledge, what would that mind map look like, and how would the different entities connect to each other? How do the different parts of the knowledge connect to each other? Okay. And then what's that hierarchy, right? Because you have main topics, main intents, and then you have subtopics that are less important, but they help round out the entire topic. The other thing that's really important, as we just saw, is semantics. How you word things, the order of words, the order of sentences, the order of paragraphs really matters when you're creating a knowledge base. A great order makes it very easy for the model to understand and to be able to respond accurately. Poor ordering will lead to confusion. And then there's also categorization and tagging. You want to be able to tag information, categorize information for the model. And so here's some examples of semantics, word embeddings, knowledge graphs, role labeling, ontologies and taxonomies. Those are really important. Frame semantics. Let's give you an example of a good structure. And imagine that this is for your company's website, because basically your website is a knowledge base of information. That knowledge base of information has an intent, which is helping users solve a specific type of problem. And so that's going to be like the primary root, the primary purpose for the website. And then all of the content is going to be related to that primary purpose. It's going to be there to serve that primary purpose. And the way we organize that content is going to inform the chatbot both what that primary purpose is, what are the auxiliary micro semantics around that purpose, okay? What's the supplementary content? What's other information that's relevant, okay? And then we'll do things like adding contextual layers. So let's go into an example. Within your website, you might be domain.com. You have your root, which is going to be, the primary thing, seed and node, right? So here you're going down a level of detail. So the root is going to be the primary. So you think of it as the primary topic, a subtopic, and a subtopic of a subtopic. An example would be personality NFT. The topic, the root is personality. Then we're looking at traits, and then we're looking at one of those traits, openness. Okay, this is an example of a URL structure. When an when an LLM looks at this sort of structure, it's going to see that openness is within the folder of traits, which is within the folder of personality, right? And so personality is the biggest topic. That's what the website is mostly about, or this part of the website is mostly about personality. And then a part of it's going to be about traits. And then another part's going to be about the types of traits, which are, for example, openness. Now, let's say that we're writing an article, a knowledge base about openness, right? Well, how will the AI know that this is what it is? Well, you're going to have a title. Okay, your headings, like for example, your H1, H2, H3, H4, and those are going to signify how important that piece of information is as it relates to the macro semantic, the macro context. And then there's the micro semantics, which is going to be all the information in your paragraphs. This is going to be basically your methodology of writing articles, your definitions, your questions, your phrases, your word order within each heading. So here's an example of something that a good format. Imagine you have a document on. Excuse me, 1 second. Okay. Imagine that. Okay. Imagine that you have a document on openness, on this trait of openness, right? You're going to start the document with an introduction. Now, this introduction is going to summarize all the headings of the article going down, of the knowledge base, right? You're going to want to consider all the things that are important about this trait. Well, what is openness, right? So that would be the first thing. The definition of openness, the trait of openness, examples of openness, examples of people who are, let's say, high in openness, right? What are the facets of high in openness? Those are some of the other main topics, right? And you could see how we're going deeper and deeper into the topic. On the very top is going to be a summary. You need to use both extractive and abstractive summaries. Then you go into the paragraphs where you're defining things. Openness is, and what you want to do is you want to use very specific language. What is a chatbot? A chatbot is, and then you give the definition. What you don't want to do is sometimes a chatbot might be, you don't want to use vague, ambiguous statements like shoulds, might be's, could be's. Okay. Other things that are important is using contextual terms. For example, using synonyms, using hyponyms, using antonyms, using booleans, using knowledge graphs, and of course, you have to use many questions, using questions. So all these things are going to help fill it out, because once you put down this context and now you're asking similar questions or you're going down a deeper path, okay, and you're using synonyms, you're rounding out and you're creating connections between words and concepts within your own knowledge base, okay? Same thing for antonyms are great because it's also telling not just what a good conversation is from our example earlier, but also what a bad conversation is, like what is low openness or versus high openness, right? So you could have these two, on a continuum, two sides of the coin, low versus high. Booleans, like yes or no questions. Then there's supplementary content. These are subtopics related to your macro context, right? So in this example, you're talking about personality trait openness. In the supplementary content, you might talk about how openness relates to the other traits, okay? What a combination of openness might be with neuroticism or some other personality trait. Then you might talk about the other traits, the other big 5 traits in more detail. Contextual layers. Okay, here's an example. And this is something that bots are just amazing at. And this is how you can actually trigger, you can trigger the bot to be able to do this on your website or within your knowledge base. And that is by adding a contextual layer. Well, now let's look at what does that mean. So let's take this sentence right here. What are the most useful fruits? So this is going to be focused on the knowledge domain of fruits, okay? For, which is a functional word, children with insomnia, and that's the contextual domain, okay? So it's looking for children with insomnia, and then what the most useful fruits are. So you see how it's combining these two things. Now here comes the contextual layer for kids under 6, okay? So now, and you see these sort of questions in ChatGPT and Google and Bard more and more. Like, what's the best type of bicycle I could buy for a 6-year-old boy that lives in, a moderate climate? So this last part for kids under 6 adds a contextual layer. So when you're creating questions and you're creating a thing, think about some very common contextual layers that you can add to your content. For example, if you're a company that sells knives, carving knives, right? You might talk about carving knife for Thanksgiving turkey. Which carving knife should you use for a Christmas ham, and so on. And this is going to round out your knowledge base. Yes, I can make the PDF. I can make this presentation available to everybody. Okay, last but not least, actions and analytics. So will we still be using flows? Yes. So what we want to do is we want to take flows that lead the user towards their goals. And then we want the bot to be able to take actions. And that's where like dialogue flow becomes really valuable because it could actually do things, right? We don't want just to like answer questions. We actually want to figure out what the user really wants and needs, and then to service them. And then we ideally want to personalize it to them. So those are going to be, you're still using flows, flows that gather information from the user, flows that once they discover what the user's goals are, create a path for them to achieve those goals. And then also seeing if there's success, like did you achieve the goal or not? And then in terms of intents and entities, they will be used to label and track your analytics. So you won't have to use intents and entities to build out as much anymore. I think even Dialogflow might get rid of the majority of them, right? So you don't need to have this for every little thing, but in your analytics, when you look at it, you might want to label certain things with certain intents and then see, okay, maybe we want to add a flow here instead of it just going to the knowledge base, or maybe we want to have some sort of follow-up after a person asks certain types of questions. Now let's talk about a few predictions. Well, here's the big one. Chatbots are everywhere. So right now it's the fastest growing technology ever. ChatGPT reached 100 million users in 2 months. And this is just the beginning. What we're seeing is, since it's now so easy to create really good products with conversational AI, with chat, we're seeing them everywhere. And it's so hard to even keep up with it because like every day there's like 50 new ways of doing things using conversational AI that are just amazing. And that's just one piece of it, right? So you have the conversational AI piece of it, but then you also have the other, you have voice, where AI is generating voice. You have AI that's generating images and videos. And so very soon, we're going to be in a world where we can just use words to create entire worlds for ourselves, right? It's going to be words that lead to worlds. And so this is going to lead to a major paradigm shift. And we're already kind of starting to see it. Now, if you were here for the last Chatbot conference, we talked about how chat was coming to search engines. The Google team was sharing some of their plans, and Bing has been doing it for years, and it's something we've been expecting for a very long time, that instead of you just asking Google a question and you're getting like 10 links, to you getting an actually good response or a code snippet, etc. And so this is one of the biggest disruptions that the internet's ever gone through, but potentially the biggest one. And so let's think about for a second what that means for the future of the web, right? So right now, when we go online for like maybe like four main reasons. One is entertainment. Another is shopping. Maybe you're looking to buy a product or a service. Another one is gathering information. Okay. So when it comes to that third one, gathering information, um, that that's something that ChatGPT can provide to us in a really, really good way. So you need to start thinking, if you're a company, like, what value does my company blog and all my knowledge have? And is it better than what ChatGPT has or what Bard has? And you need to think of ways in which it is better. So, for example, you might have unique knowledge or unique ways of interpreting and making that knowledge meaningful and be able to extract more value out of this knowledge. If you are able to do that, you can create experiences, applications around this that are unique, that ChatGPT or Bard cannot copy or cannot simulate. So that's something your organization really needs to start thinking about, and that is having their own knowledge base, and then creating unique experiences, communities, applications around it, which will give people reason to come to your website instead of just getting a quick answer from ChatGPT. Now, how will this impact designers? So, the way the job is unfolding is that a great designer, a great conversational designer, is going to be someone that could synthesize and integrate knowledge into a system that's easy to make knowledge retrieval, efficient, and then use this knowledge to help users achieve their goals. Okay, and then be able to analyze the information, the data, and make sure that's what's happening. So basically, it's these two things. It's working with knowledge and helping users achieve their goals. And then, in terms of like growth opportunities, right now we're seeing that some companies are letting go of designers, and I think that tends to be larger companies. And part of the reason is that now, like, you don't need that many great designers to build out great products, right? So if you're a big company and you have like too many designers, you're probably going to let go of some of them. On the flip side, I think almost most businesses see that they need to start working with AI and these large language models. So there's going to be a big increase in demand for creating products. So it's going to give conversation designers a lot of opportunity. So now we are on the questions. And then Austin, we can bring Austin on. So does anybody have any questions? I see a couple here, and then we'll open it up. Yeah, so yes. So you can use it with open data. You mean like, so essentially that's the cool thing about knowledge bases, is that when it comes to specific knowledge, you could say like, go here first. If there's nothing here, then you can use the wider web. Austin. Yeah. Hey, how you doing, Austin?
Good. Great
Good.
presentation.
Can you turn on your camera?
I'm trying to figure it out. It's been a minute.
Oh, there you are. Hey.
Hey.
Awesome. Hi, Nat. How are you? Well, guys, you're welcome to jump on. We could have like a conversation. So Austin, tell us your story. I know you were working at Salesforce for some time as a conversational designer. You were actually coming. You were coming to our conferences and you were gathering all this knowledge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed in the chat some people said, yeah, I don't know anything, I'm starting from zero. And it was
it's one guy, but yeah.
Coming to your conference that was my ground zero as well. So yeah, I started out as a UX designer in 2015. I took a boot camp and I was doing UX design, but having worked in China and lived in Japan when I was younger in college, I really wanted to tie language with my UX skills. And as you mentioned in this presentation, there's a lot of UX and conversation design overlay. So yeah, it seemed like a really good combination to add to my skills. And at your conference, getting knowledge that you're going to give everyone today, plus the Conversation Design Institute being there, really helped give me the foundation to become a successful conversation designer.
Yeah, that's awesome. And did you know, and maybe it's too early to know really, but did you notice any change at Salesforce with LLMs?
Not while I was there, unfortunately. I feel
Yeah,
like the LLM craze has been over the last couple of months.
yeah,
I was there until January. But I mean, I think, yeah, you could definitely tell that LLMs will be coming out soon.
yeah. And Inat, how are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I build more of flow-oriented bots,
Yeah.
and I want to inside all this conversational AI. So I'm here to learn, and it's very interesting.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah, it's going to change because you're going to be building way less flows, but the flows are going to be more important.
Yeah,
I think
that's what I want to see how you can combine these two, because I used ChatGPT,
yeah,
and I know to build flow, but I think the combination is what's powerful, because I do want you to do actions and to do the things that I want to lead them. With the flow, I can control the flow and the way I want them to go. So I want to see how can you combine these two things together.
Right. Well, that's what we're going to be doing today. So you're not just going to learn how to do it, but you're going to actually do it. And I also want to answer a couple of questions that we have in the chats. One is from Patricia. She wants to know, is there a future world where the knowledge base isn't articles, but organized information, perhaps in bullet points and not publicly accessible? So I think saying articles or bullet points, because articles, it could be an article with just bullet points, right? So I think that's not an important difference of what we call it. In terms of could it be something that only has that's not public accessible? Absolutely. And that's what all these companies that have a lot of data, proprietary data that's really useful, that's what they're doing, is they're closing up their APIs, like you saw Reddit and Twitter like astronomically raise the price of their APIs. That's why they're doing it, because all these large language models were learning off of Reddit and Twitter. They were taking all this data and they were learning for free. Now, in the future, like Quora, Reddit, they're going to be able to have their own bots that leverage their own data. And so, of course, if your company has proprietary data, you can build unique experiences and unique conversations around it. And that's not something that, ChatGPT or Bard won't have access to. So we're going to be talking, Patricia, about knowledge, knowledge bases. Now, the workshop is not a knowledge-based workshop where you get to create a knowledge base. We're going to be using knowledge bases. So Katie also has a question. I'm wondering how we should shift the way we build websites, webcontent, in order to make them into better knowledge bases for LMs. Yeah, so great question, Katie. So everything that applies to creating great knowledge bases for LLMs is also going to apply for your website. So you could take that same sort of structure and you could start implementing it within your own website. They actually call this semantic SEO. Okay, we're using semantics for your search engine optimization, right? You're telling the bot how to read and understand your website. We're using those same sort of concepts when we're creating our knowledge bases. And so you can definitely do that. And then you can consider, like, what type of information do you want Google or ChatGPT to know about your company and your website? That could be your publicly available information on your website. It could be structured in the same way that your knowledge bases are internally that are not publicly available. And that way you have a symbiosis. Then your personal bot could leverage both, right? It could leverage your website data as a knowledge base. It could leverage your articles, your documents as a knowledge base, and then it could also use the greater web. Yeah, will we be able to talk about how we can give our bot a personality? And that's something that Sarah is asking. I think the short answer is yes. There's been so many attempts at it. The other thing is that we automatically assume and see personality, right? And so even if you don't give your bot a personality, your users are going to assume personality traits. They're going to project onto it because, again, this is part of one of our biases we hold as human beings, right? They're going to attribute sex and gender to your bot, even though obviously it's neither. Austin, you have some insight about this.
Yeah, I think that even ChatGPT has a personality. I think a lot of people don't think of it as having such, but by not saying it doesn't know things, or sorry, I can't answer certain questions, and guessing, it has a personality of confidence, because it wants you to be confident in it.
Right. There was a study I read way long ago, like 2015. And I'm just going to share this one, and then the voice flow team could start. And in the study, I forget, I think it was Indio, one of the best design studios. They created this bot that was helping women exercise and run daily. Okay. And when the bot was asking the very same questions, like, did you run today? How long did you run for, etc. If the woman was having a bad day, they interpreted the bot as a male. If they were having a good day, they interpreted it as a female. And so, like, we tend to project human qualities and traits onto animals, onto objects, onto AI systems, and so it's unavoidable. It's kind of one of our bites. So, any last thoughts, Austin?
Only if questions. I have an article on personality design, building the personality for your bot. I just put it in the chat. But yeah, I think that it's a great time to enter this field. But that is a great time. But there's no certainty in like exactly what to do. So that's the only difficulty. But I think as long as you reach out to people, stay on top of the updates and the news that's coming out, that you'll be ahead of the game.